The human stood in the middle of a giant alien hall, his hands tied with glowing metal bands that pulsed with strange energy. The walls were made of black stone, shining with blue fire that came from tall torches placed in every corner. Around him, dozens of alien soldiers watched in silence. Their eyes glowed faintly under their helmets, and their sharp weapons pointed toward him, as if ready to strike at any moment. He could hear the echo of their breathing, deep and heavy, filling the air with an unnatural rhythm. The human did not move. His chest rose and fell calmly, as if he were standing in his own home rather than the center of his enemy's stronghold. Then she entered. The hall grew even quieter, so quiet that the crackling of the blue fire became the loudest sound. She was tall, taller than any soldier present, her steps echoing with power and authority. Her armor was black with silver edges, each piece designed not only for battle, but to display her rank. Her face was cold, her eyes glowing gold, and her long hair fell behind her like a shadow. Every soldier lowered their head when she passed, but she ignored them. Her attention was fixed only on the human standing in chains. She stopped in front of him. For a long moment, she said nothing, simply staring into his eyes as if searching for weakness. Most prisoners would already be on their knees, begging for mercy, but the human did not lower his head. He looked back at her with the same calmness he had carried from the moment he was captured. His silence irritated her more than screams ever could. "You are strange," she finally spoke, her voice sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. "Others fear me before I even speak. They shake, they cry, they beg for their lives. But you—" She leaned closer, her golden eyes burning with both curiosity and anger. "Do you not fear me, human?" The hall seemed to hold its breath, the soldier's eyes fixed on him, waiting for the answer. A wrong word could mean instant death. No one in the Empire had ever dared speak against their princess, the one who commanded armies and broke champions. Yet the human did not look away. He tilted his head slightly, and for the first time a small smile appeared on his lips. His voice was calm, almost gentle, yet it carried across the entire hall. No. That single word struck her harder than any weapon. For a heartbeat, she froze, her mind blank. No? She had heard many answers in her life, desperate cries, wild lies, trembling promises, but never a simple, calm refusal, never such honesty spoken without fear. She straightened slowly, hiding the rush of confusion and anger that threatened to crack her cold mask. The soldiers shifted uneasily. Some tightened their grips on their weapons, expecting her to order the human's execution. Others looked at him with a flicker of unease, as if his courage had infected the air. Still, the princess raised her hand slightly, stopping them. She wanted to hear more. "Why?" she demanded, her voice harder now, echoing in the vast chamber. "Why do you not fear me? Do you not see where you stand? Do you not feel the chains around your hands? Do you not know that with one word, I can end your life?" The human's smile did not fade. He looked around the hall, at the soldiers, at the fire, at the throne that loomed behind her. Then he returned his eyes to hers. "I see everything," he said. "I know who you are, what power you hold. I know the chains, the blades, the walls, and the silence. But fear? Fear is not here." He tapped his chest with his bound hands. "Not inside me." Her heart gave a sudden, unwanted thump, faster than before. She clenched her fists, hiding the reaction. This was dangerous. This man was not like the others. Something in his eyes unsettled her, something wild and free, something she could not command. It was not foolishness. It was not madness. It was something else entirely, and she hated that she did not understand it. She stepped back slightly, her face still hard, but inside, her thoughts raced. She told herself she was angry, but another truth hid beneath that anger: curiosity. What made this fragile creature so calm before death? What burned in his chest that no blade or chain could silence? The silence stretched long again, but this time it was not empty. It was heavy, charged, like the moment before a storm. The soldiers shifted their feet nervously, waiting for her order. Some expected her to kill him to prove her strength. Others, though they would never admit it, wanted to hear what else he would say. Finally, she spoke again, slower this time, her voice carrying less anger and more calculation. "You will regret your words, human. I will make sure of it." Her eyes locked on his, as if daring him to finally break, to finally show fear. But he only shrugged lightly, the smile still on his lips, and answered, "Maybe, but not today." The soldiers gasped quietly. The princess's heart pounded faster than she wanted to admit. For the first time in her life, she did not know whether she was in control of the situation, or if the chains around the human's wrists truly meant nothing at all. She turned sharply, her cloak sweeping the ground, and ordered him taken away. But even as she walked back toward her throne, she could feel his calm gaze following her, steady and fearless, burning into her mind. That night, as the torches dimmed and the hall grew silent again, she found herself replaying his words. Fear is not here. No prisoner had ever spoken like that, and though she would never admit it aloud, her own heart had raced when she heard him say it. The next day, the human was brought into a different chamber, one far darker and colder than the grand hall. The floor was made of iron, wet with dripping water from the ceiling. Strange alien symbols glowed faintly on the walls, pulsing like living veins. This was not a place of trials. It was a place of breaking. Prisoners were dragged here to lose their spirit, to beg, to scream, until nothing but fear remained in them. But as the human stood there with his hands still bound, he looked around with the same calm face, as if he were only visiting. The alien princess entered again, her tall figure casting a long shadow. Her soldiers lined the room, their sharp spears pointed toward the human's chest. Her voice was colder this time, stripped of curiosity, filled only with command. You spoke boldly yesterday, human, but words are air. Let us see how long your courage lasts when faced with truth. She ordered one of the guards to bring forward a heavy staff. At the tip of the staff was a crystal that burned with red light. The guard touched it to the floor, and instantly the iron hissed, leaving a black mark as if fire itself had kissed it. The staff was no simple weapon. It could burn through flesh like paper. She let the human see it, then gestured. Kneel. The human did not move. His eyes flickered down at the staff, then back to her face. Calm, steady, not even a flicker of fear. The soldiers murmured quietly. No one had ever resisted this command. She narrowed her golden eyes. Kneel, or your skin will melt from your bones. He smiled faintly, not mocking, but almost gentle, as if he pitied her. If fear is the only chain you hold, then you have nothing else. Her jaw tightened. Anger flashed in her chest, but something else too. Confusion and the beginning of doubt. She motioned sharply, and the guard pressed the burning staff close to the human's arm. The heat seared, smoke rising from the air around him. His skin reddened, but he did not cry out. He did not fall. He only closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply, and when he opened them again, they were steady and calm. Gasps filled the room. Some soldiers looked away, unable to understand how a fragile human body could endure without breaking. The princess forced her face to remain hard, but deep inside her heart thudded. She had seen warriors from her own kind scream in seconds under the same pain. This man stood tall, silent, almost peaceful. Perhaps pain is not enough, she said coldly, trying to regain control. She motioned again, and the guards dragged out a cage from the shadows. Inside the cage was a creature, something twisted, with long claws and jaws lined with razor teeth. It hissed, slamming itself against the bars, hungry for blood. The soldiers stepped back. Even they feared this beast. The prince's lips curved into a thin smile. This animal was bred to tear flesh, to drink blood. It will not stop until you are nothing but bones. Will you still smile when it bites into your throat? The cage opened with a metallic screech. The beast lunged forward, its claws scraping against the floor as it raced toward the human. The soldiers tensed, some expecting to see him torn apart in seconds. But the human did not run. He did not scream. Instead, he took one small step to the side. At the last moment, the beast's claws swiped empty air, and it crashed into the ground. The human moved again, calm and sharp, his eyes locked on the creature. Each time it lunged, he shifted just enough, his movements simple but precise. He had no weapon, no armor, yet he danced around the beast as if he had trained for this moment all his life. The soldiers leaned forward, forgetting their duty, caught in the sight of one man standing against a monster with nothing but his instincts. Finally, when the beast leapt high, aiming for his neck, the human dropped to the ground, rolled, and pulled his chains tight around its throat. The creature thrashed, howled, clawed, but the human held on, his muscles straining, his face calm with focus. Moments later, the beast collapsed, its body heavy and lifeless on the floor. The human stood, breathing hard, blood running down his arm, but his eyes still calm. The room fell silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The soldiers stared in disbelief. The princess's heart raced faster than before, though she kept her face cold. Inside, however, she was shaken. She had not expected him to survive, much less defeat the beast with nothing but chains and courage. She stepped forward, forcing her voice to stay sharp. "You are still flesh. You are still weak. You cannot win forever." Her words were strong, but deep inside, she wondered if they were true. The human looked at her, his lips curved into that same calm smile. "Maybe, but fear will never win over me. And that is what you wanted to see, wasn't it?" For the first time in her life, she felt as if someone had turned her own words and power against her. Her soldiers looked between them, unsure whether to fear her more or him. And though she would never admit it aloud, a thought crept into her mind like a shadow she could not banish. If this human could not be broken by pain, or by beasts, or by death itself, then what could break him at all? The human was thrown into a deep cell beneath the fortress. The walls were made of black stone, slick with moisture, and the air was thick with the smell of rust and old blood. Strange glowing chains held his wrists and ankles, pulsing faintly with alien energy. These were not normal chains. They were alive, humming like they carried the breath of the planet itself. No prisoner had ever broken free once locked inside them. Many had tried. Many had died with their wrists burned and their bones shattered. 2 guards stood outside the bars, watching him with cold, curious eyes. They whispered to each other in their harsh language, sure that this fragile human would finally break. "He will scream by morning," one muttered. The other chuckled, tightening his grip on his spear. "By dawn, his spirit will be gone." But inside the cell, the human simply sat down against the wall. His back rested against the stone, and he stretched his legs as if he were settling down to sleep in a quiet home. His eyes closed, and his breathing became steady. The glow of the chains reflected on his calm face, but he did not fight them, he did not curse, and he did not beg. Hours passed. The guards shifted on their feet, waiting for the usual sounds of panic, struggling, or tears. But the cell stayed quiet, almost peaceful. The only sounds were the dripping water and the steady rhythm of the human's breathing. By morning, word had spread. Soldiers whispered through the fortress that the human had not moved, had not cried, had not even looked afraid. Some laughed, saying he was too foolish to understand his fate. Others frowned, uneasy at the thought that perhaps the chains did not affect him the way they should. When the princess entered the dungeon, the guards stood straighter. Hours, she walked with her usual cold grace, her cloak brushing the ground, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She stopped in front of the human's cell, staring at him for a long time. He sat, as he had all night, calm, steady, as if the chains were nothing but decoration. "Strange creature," she said finally, her voice sharp against the silence. "Do you know where you are? These chains have crushed warriors twice your size. They were made to break the strongest of my people. Yet you sit as if they are nothing." The human opened his eyes slowly, meeting her gaze. His lips curved into the smallest of smiles. "Chains are only strong if you believe in them." Her chest tightened, though her face showed no reaction. She stepped closer, her voice colder. "Do not speak riddles to me. These chains are alive. They burn flesh, they pierce bone, they drink strength. They are feared by all. Why do you not struggle? Why do you not scream?" He tilted his head slightly, his calm eyes never leaving hers. "Because fear feeds them. If I give them nothing, they have nothing." Her heart gave a sharp, unwanted beat. For the second time, she felt something she did not understand. His words were simple, yet they unsettled her more than screams ever could. She turned to the guards, her voice sharp. "Tighten the chains." The guards obeyed, pressing their weapons against the glowing metal. The chains hissed, tightening around the human's wrists and ankles. The glow brightened, searing into his skin. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. The guards grinned, expecting him to scream now. But the human only closed his eyes again, his face calm, his breathing steady. Sweat rolled down his forehead, but he gave no sound. The princess's fists clenched. She could hear the blood in her own ears, loud and fast. This was not possible. No one endured like this. No one sat still while the chains dug deeper into their skin. She took a step forward, her golden eyes burning. "What are you, human?" He opened his eyes again and whispered softly, "Free." The single word struck her like a blade. It was absurd. He was chained, locked, surrounded by guards. And yet, when he said it, she almost believed him. Something in his voice, in his eyes, made her feel as if the chains truly did not matter. The guards shifted nervously. Some avoided his gaze, afraid of what they saw there. Rumors spread even faster now. Rumors that the human could not be broken, that the chains held only his body, not his spirit. Soldiers who once mocked him now spoke in low voices, uncertain. That night, the guards who stood watch over his cell whispered among themselves. "He is no ordinary man," one muttered. "Did you see his eyes? The chains bite, but he does not bleed like us." The other guard shook his head, uneasy. "Maybe he is cursed, or maybe he is stronger than he looks." Inside the cell, the human remained calm. He leaned back against the stone, breathing steadily, his eyes half closed. The glowing chains still pulsed around his wrists, but he seemed untouched by them. Instead of looking broken, he looked as if he were waiting for something, or perhaps for someone. And far above, in her private chamber, the princess could not sleep. She replayed his words again and again. Free. It echoed in her mind, louder than any cry or scream she had ever heard. She clenched her fists, angry at herself, angry at him, and yet she could not stop hearing that calm voice. For the first time in her life, she wondered if the chains she trusted so much might not be strong enough, not against him, and not against the strange feeling growing inside her own chest. The next morning, the human was brought out of the dungeon. His wrists still carried marks from the glowing chains, but his steps were steady, and his eyes were calm. The soldiers who dragged him looked uneasy, for though he was their prisoner, it felt as if he were walking freely among them. Whispers followed him through the halls. Some said he could not feel pain. Others claimed he was blessed with some hidden power. None dared say it loudly, but many began to fear him in ways they could not explain. The princess sat on her throne, tall and cold, her golden eyes glowing beneath the light of burning torches. Around her, warriors filled the great hall. Their armor clinked, their weapons gleamed, and their voices were hushed with expectation. This was no ordinary gathering. Today, she had called them to witness what she believed would finally crush the human spirit. She wanted his defiance broken in front of all who served her. When the human was brought before her, she rose from the throne and stepped down, her cloak sweeping the ground. Every movement she made was slow, deliberate, heavy with authority. She circled him once, her eyes scanning him as if searching for weakness. Finally, she stopped, her voice echoing across the hall. "You have resisted pain, resisted chains, resisted beasts, yet still you stand. Very well, human. Today, you face me." Gasps spread among the soldiers. Never before had their princess lowered herself to fight a prisoner. It was unheard of. But none dared question her. She gestured to the guards, and they unbound the chains. The heavy glowing metal fell to the ground with a hiss, leaving his wrists red and raw. He rubbed them briefly, then lifted his eyes to her. "You will fight me," she said, her golden eyes narrowing. "If you win, you live. If you lose, you die. Either way, your spirit will finally break." The human tilted his head slightly, a small smile appearing on his lips. "Then let us see." The soldiers formed a wide circle, their spears planted into the ground to mark the boundary. The air grew thick with tension. The princess drew her weapon, a long blade made of black metal that pulsed with a faint light. It was heavy, forged for her people, far stronger than anything human hands could carry. She pointed it at him, expecting fear at last, but he only raised his fists, empty, bare, and said nothing. The duel began with a sharp cry. She lunged forward, her blade flashing through the air. The human moved quickly, faster than they expected, stepping aside so the strike cut only through empty space. She turned with speed, her blade sweeping again, but he ducked low, the edge passing just above his head. The soldiers shouted, their voices rising with every move. Again and again, she struck. Her blade slammed into the floor, into the stone pillars, into the air where he had stood a moment before. Each strike was filled with power, enough to shatter bone, enough to crush his fragile body. But each time, he dodged, shifted, rolled away with movements that seemed wild but carried strange rhythm. His fists struck back, not with the force of her blade, but sharp and precise. He hit her arm once, her shoulder another time, even her ribs with a sudden jab. Small blows, yet they shook her balance more than she expected. The princess grew angrier with every heartbeat. No one had ever dared fight her like this. No one had ever stood in the circle against her and survived more than a few moments. Yet this human, weaker, smaller, unarmed, was not only standing, he was making her miss. He was turning her strength against her. The soldiers roared louder, some in shock, some in disbelief. They had expected blood, but what they saw instead was something else, something they had never imagined. A human standing against their princess, moving like a flame that could not be caught. Finally, with a sharp cry, she struck downward, aiming to end it in one blow. The black blade slammed toward his chest, but at the last instant, the human moved. His hand shot out, his chains still dangling from his wrist, and he caught the hilt of her blade. With all his strength, he twisted. The weapon spun from her grip, clattering across the stone floor. Silence fell. The soldiers froze, their eyes wide. The princess stood unarmed, her chest rising and falling with sharp breaths. The human stood a few steps away, his fists raised, his face calm. For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly, the human lowered his hands. He did not strike her. He did not press his advantage. He simply looked at her, his calm eyes steady, and then stepped back. The soldiers erupted into shouts, half in rage, half in disbelief. Some gripped their weapons, waiting for her command to kill him. But she did not speak. Her golden eyes burned as she stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She should have been furious, humiliated, enraged. And yet, beneath the fire of her anger, something else stirred, a feeling she could not name. He had disarmed her, the strongest warrior of her people, without a weapon, without fear. And instead of destroying her, he had spared her. That single choice cut deeper than any blade. It left her shaken, her chest tight, her thoughts scattered. She raised her hand sharply, silencing the room. Her voice was cold, though it trembled faintly inside. Enough, take him back. The soldiers obeyed, dragging the human away. But as they pulled him toward the dungeon again, his eyes met hers one last time. Calm, fearless, steady. That night, as she sat alone, her weapon lying untouched beside her, she replayed the moment again and again. The feel of her blade leaving her hand, the human's calm gaze, the choice he had made to spare her. For the first time in her life, she did not feel like the conqueror. For the first time, she wondered if fear itself had changed sides. The dungeon was silent when the guards dragged the human back to his cell. His body carried bruises from the duel, and his skin still showed the burns from the chains, but his steps did not falter. He walked as if he were not a prisoner, but a man in control of his own path. The guards muttered among themselves, confused and uneasy. Some had seen warriors stronger than him die screaming after only one strike from their princess. Yet this human had stood against her, had even taken her blade from her hands. No one dared say it loudly, but whispers grew, whispers that the man was not ordinary. The princess did not sleep that night. She sat in her chamber, her golden eyes staring at the wall. Her mind replayed every detail of the fight. She could still feel the moment his hand twisted her weapon from her grasp, the shocking emptiness in her palm, the sound of her blade falling. No one had ever disarmed her before. No one had dared. And yet, the most disturbing memory was not losing her weapon. It was the way he had looked at her afterward. He had the chance to strike, to humiliate her in front of her people, to prove himself. But he did not. He had lowered his fists. He had stepped back. That choice haunted her. She told herself she should feel rage. She should want his head. Yet, whenever she thought of his eyes, calm and steady, her heart gave an uneven beat. She clenched her fists, furious at her own weakness. She was the heir of a mighty empire, feared across worlds, but here she was, sitting awake in the middle of the night because of a human smile. By dawn, she ordered him to be brought before her again. The guards obeyed quickly, dragging him out of the dungeon and into the great hall. This time, fewer soldiers lined the walls, but those who came could not hide their curiosity. They wanted to hear what would happen next. The human stood before her once more, his wrists bound again. His eyes, however, were the same as always, calm, unbroken. She stepped closer to him, her voice low and sharp. "You should be dead. No one survives my blade, and yet you not only stood, you dared to take it from me." The human tilted his head slightly. "You gave me the chance." Her eyes narrowed. "I gave you nothing." His lips curved faintly. "You struck with anger, not with clarity. That is when strength becomes weakness." His words pierced her like an arrow. Around them, the soldiers shifted uneasily. Never had anyone spoken to her like that, not even her own generals. Yet this man, weak in body compared to her people, spoke as though he saw through her, as if he held no fear of punishment. She stepped closer until she was only a breath away, her golden eyes locked on his. "Tell me, human, why do you not fear me? Why do you not fear death? Why do you not fear pain?" Her voice trembled faintly, not from weakness, but from a tension she could not control. For a moment, silence filled the hall. Then the human spoke softly, but every word was clear. "Because fear is a chain, and I broke mine long ago." The hall grew still. Even the soldiers who had mocked him before now stood frozen, caught by the weight of his words. The princess's heart thudded hard in her chest. She wanted to laugh, to call it foolishness, yet she could not. She had seen him in chains. She had seen him burned, beaten, and hunted by beasts. And through it all, he had never bent, never begged, never screamed. His words were not lies. They were truth, and that truth unsettled her more than anything. She turned sharply, her cloak sweeping the ground as she walked back to her throne. But her mind was not calm. His voice echoed inside her skull. Fear is a chain. She had ruled through fear her entire life. Fear was the foundation of her throne, the power that made others bow. If fear was only a chain, then what did that make her empire? When she sat again, she kept her face cold, hiding the storm inside. She gestured at him. "You speak boldly, but words do not feed armies. Words do not win wars. Tell me, what is left when words are all you have?" The human's eyes glinted, calm yet sharp. "What is left?" he repeated softly. "Freedom. And that is stronger than fear." For the first time in her life, she had no reply. Her golden eyes locked on him, but her throat felt tight. She clenched her fists, furious at herself for hesitating. Around her, soldiers whispered quietly, their voices carrying the unease she felt inside. She rose suddenly, her voice sharp to cover the tremor she felt. "Enough. Take him away. I will decide his fate later." The guards obeyed, dragging him back toward the dungeon. Yet even as he disappeared through the dark doors, his words clung to the air like smoke, refusing to fade. Freedom, stronger than fear. That night, as she sat alone once more, she realized something she had never thought possible. The human was not just defying her power. He was changing her. His words had broken through the armor she had built around her heart. And though she tried to push it away, her heart still raced whenever she remembered his calm eyes and steady voice. For the first time, she wondered if perhaps true strength was not in making others fear, but in living without it. And that thought frightened her more than any enemy ever had. The fortress shook with sudden noise as alarms echoed through the halls. The ground trembled, and the sharp sound of horns rang from the watchtowers above. Soldiers rushed through the corridors, their heavy boots slamming against the stone floor. Shouts filled the air, orders clashing with fear, because the enemy had come. Another alien faction, long rivals of the princess's people, had launched a surprise attack. In the dungeon, the human sat in silence as usual, his back against the cold wall. He heard the chaos above, the pounding of footsteps, the cries of panic. 2 guards ran past his cell, shouting to one another, their words quick and frantic. For the first time since his capture, the fortress itself no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a cage about to crumble. Moments later, the heavy doors swung open, and soldiers dragged him out, rushing to move the prisoners before the enemy broke through. The human was shoved into a corner of the courtyard with several others, chains still tight around his wrists. But instead of fear, his eyes scanned the scene calmly. He saw soldiers stumbling, weapons shaking in their hands. He saw the fire from enemy projectiles tearing into the outer walls. The air burned with smoke, dust, and screams. The princess appeared then, her cloak torn by the wind, her golden eyes sharp as fire. She barked commands, her voice carrying above the chaos, trying to rally her warriors. They obeyed, but their fear was clear. For the first time, she saw hesitation in their eyes. Her soldiers had always been strong under her rule, but tonight the fear of death shook even the bravest among them. And then, the enemy broke through. The outer gates exploded into shards of iron, and enemy warriors poured in like a black tide. Their armor gleamed with red light, their weapons burning with strange fire. They screamed their battle cries, filling the air with rage and thunder. Her soldiers faltered, some stepping back, their lines breaking. The princess drew her weapon and charged into the fight, her blade cutting through enemy after enemy, her cloak flowing behind her like a storm. She fought with fury, her strikes powerful, but she could see it in the corner of her eyes. Her soldiers were failing. The fear she had always used to control them was now working against her. They feared death more than they feared her. And so they hesitated, their hands shaking, their blades slow. Amid the chaos, the human acted. While others cowered, he stood, his chain still burning against his wrists. He looked at the battlefield, at the soldiers falling, at the princess surrounded by enemies, and then he ran forward. The guards shouted at him, thinking he was escaping, but he did not run away. He ran toward the fight. Without a weapon, he tackled an enemy soldier, ripping the burning spear from his hands. With one swift motion, he struck the warrior down, then turned to face another. His movements were raw, unpolished, but every strike carried desperate strength and fearless resolve. The chains clattered against his arms as he swung, turning them into weapons themselves. Sparks flew as metal met metal, but he did not slow. The soldiers of the fortress froze for a moment, stunned by the sight. A human prisoner, fighting on their side, throwing himself into the heart of the enemy. He should have been weak, helpless, broken. Instead, he fought with more courage than any of them. The princess saw him too. In the middle of her struggle, her eyes caught him, chains rattling, face smeared with blood and dirt, striking with wild determination. For a heartbeat, she faltered, her chest tightening with a feeling she could not name. She had tried to break him, but here he was, standing in the fire she herself could barely control. An enemy blade swung toward her blind side. She turned too late. But before it could cut her down, the human appeared, crashing into the attacker with full force. The two fell to the ground, the human driving the stolen spear into the enemy's chest. He rolled away, blood on his arms, his chest heaving, but his eyes calm as always. "You fight like a madman," she shouted at him over the roar of the battle. He gave her a tired smile. "No, I fight because there's no room for fear." Her heart pounded at his words. For a moment, it felt as though the world around her blurred, the fire, the screams, the clash of steel. All she saw was him, standing fearless in the chaos, chains still heavy on his wrists, yet moving freer than any warrior she had ever known. Together, they fought. She cut down 2 more enemies with her blade, while he slammed the chains into another's helmet, sending sparks flying. Step by step, they pushed forward, side by side. The soldiers who had been faltering before began to rise again, their fear melting as they watched. Seeing their princess fight beside the unbroken human filled them with new fire. They raised their weapons and roared, surging back into the battle with strength they had almost lost. The enemy, who had come in believing victory would be easy, now faced a wall of resistance. And at the center of that wall was a human prisoner who refused to bow. When the dust finally settled, the courtyard was filled with broken weapons and fallen bodies. Smoke curled into the night sky, and the fortress walls still burned, but the enemy had been pushed back. The soldiers cheered weakly, exhausted but alive. The princess stood in the middle of it all, her weapon dripping with blood. Her chest rose and fell sharply, her body heavy with fatigue. She turned to look at the human who stood nearby, his shoulders bruised, his arms cut, but his eyes calm as ever. For a long moment, neither spoke. She stared at him, her golden eyes burning, her heart racing harder than from any battle. He had saved her life. He had fought for her people, and he had done it all without fear. She stepped closer, her voice low, almost uncertain. "Why? You could have run. You could have let me die. Why did you fight?" He met her eyes, his voice steady though his body shook with exhaustion. "Because fear is death, and I choose life." Her breath caught. For once, she could not find her voice. Around them, her soldiers whispered in awe, but all she could hear was his answer, echoing deep inside her chest. The courtyard was filled with smoke and silence after the battle. The ground was stained with blood, broken weapons lay scattered, and the walls still burned from enemy fire. Soldiers leaned on their spears, exhausted, some sitting on the stones with heavy breaths, others standing in stunned quiet. In the middle of it all stood the human, his chest rising and falling slowly, his chains broken, his arms cut and bruised. He looked tired, but not defeated. His eyes remained calm, steady, like a fire that refused to die. The enemy had been pushed back, but not gone. Everyone knew they would return, stronger, angrier. Yet at that moment, none of the soldiers looked to their princess for strength. Their eyes turned toward the human. Whispers spread through the crowd. He fought without fear. He saved her life. The chains could not break him. Those whispers grew, moving like a wave, until the entire courtyard felt charged with something new. Something dangerous for their rulers. Hope. The princess stood at the far end, her blade dripping with blood, her golden eyes fixed on the human. She had watched him fight beside her, had felt his presence at her back, had seen his hands strike down enemies who would have ended her life. Her heart was still racing, not only from battle, but from something deeper, something she had never allowed herself to feel before. It frightened her more than any enemy's weapon. She walked forward slowly, her steps echoing against the broken stones. Every soldier watched in silence, waiting to see what she would do. Would she strike him down for daring to fight in her war? Would she thank him, a word never spoken to a prisoner? Or would she do something no one expected? She stopped in front of him. For a long moment, she said nothing. Her golden eyes searched his face, looking for weakness, for fear, for anything she could use to explain away the storm inside her chest. But there was nothing. His eyes were calm, his posture steady, even though his body was wounded. He looked at her not as a prisoner, not as a servant, but as an equal. Finally, she spoke, her voice low but carrying through the courtyard. "You should have run. You should have left me to die. Why did you stand?" The human's lips curved into a faint smile. His voice was steady, almost gentle, yet strong enough for all to hear. "Because fear is the only chain, and I will never wear it." The words hit her harder than any blade. She remembered the first time she had asked him if he feared her. She remembered his calm answer then, and she felt again how her heart had raced at that moment. Now, after all the pain, all the chains, all the battles, he stood before her, proving those words were not pride, not lies, but truth. Her chest tightened. She should have been furious. She should have reminded him of his place. Yet instead, she felt something break inside her. The certainty she had carried all her life, the belief that fear was power. She realized now that it was not fear that had held her people together in this battle. It was the human, standing fearless, showing them that courage was greater than chains. The soldiers shifted uneasily, waiting for her command. Some expected her to order his execution, to protect her pride. Others, though they dared not say it, hoped she would honor him. She did neither. Instead, she took a slow step closer. Her voice dropped lower, almost like a confession. "Then from this day, no blade will touch you. No chain will bind you. You are under my protection." Gasps spread through the courtyard. Soldiers looked at one another, wide-eyed. Never had their princess spoken such words to an outsider, much less to a human. It was more than mercy. It was recognition. The human studied her face for a moment, then gave a small nod. He did not bow. He did not kneel. He only stood, steady, as if her words changed nothing within him, though everyone around them knew everything had changed. Her golden eyes burned as she turned sharply to her soldiers. "Remember what you saw tonight," she declared, her voice powerful, shaking the air. "A human who feared nothing, a human who fought for life. Let this be the lesson. Fear makes you weak. Courage makes you strong. Follow that, and you will never fall." The soldiers roared, their voices echoing against the broken walls, their fear replaced with fire. Some shouted the princess's name. Others whispered about the human, their words carrying respect instead of mockery. But when the noise filled the air, the princess felt none of it. Her eyes stayed fixed on him. Her heart still beat too fast, her thoughts tangled. She had never bowed to anyone, never allowed anyone to stand equal before her. Yet this human had done it without asking. He had broken no laws, only chains she had never seen before, chains inside her own heart. That night, when the fortress finally grew quiet, she sat alone in her chamber. The fires outside had died, the soldiers had gone to rest, but she could not sleep. His words replayed in her mind again and again. "Fear is the only chain, and I will never wear it." She touched her chest where her heart still raced, and for the first time in her life, she whispered to herself a truth she had never dared to admit. She feared nothing in the galaxy, except losing him.